The rain hammered the windshield like 1,000 accusations as Brandon gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white against the leather. "Dad, I'm gay," he blurted into the phone, the words exploding out before he could swallow them back, his voice cracking like thunder over the Golden Gate. On the other end, silence stretched longer than the bridge he was crossing, a void so deep it threatened to swallow him whole, until his father's voice, rough as gravel, whispered, "Son, sit down. We need to talk." Brandon slammed on the brakes at the next pullout, the SUV skidding on the slick pavement, heart pounding like a war drum in his chest. He'd rehearsed this 100 times in the mirror of his cramped Mission District apartment, calm, collected, ready for the fallout. But nothing prepared him for the raw edge in his dad's tone, that mix of fear and something else, something buried deep. He killed the engine, the wipers slapping futilely against the downpour, and waited, the phone pressed so hard to his ear it left a mark. Brandon, his father, Jack, finally said, "I'm proud of you. More than you know." The words hung there, absurdly tender, like a lifeline tossed into a storm. Brandon's breath hitched. He'd braced for shouts, for disownment, for the Bible verses his evangelical grandma loved to hurl like grenades. "Not this. Not pride. But there's something I gotta tell you," Jack continued, his voice dropping to a gravelly murmur. "Something from way back. Meet me at the house." Now, the drive to Sausalito felt eternal, the fog rolling in off the bay like ghosts from Brandon's past. He was 28, a graphic designer scraping by in San Francisco's tech-fueled frenzy, where rainbow flags fluttered from every other balcony but acceptance still felt conditional in his own family. Growing up in the suburbs of Oakland, he'd hidden his crushes on the quarterback, buried his confusion under layers of straight guy armor, beer pong at frat parties, dates with girls who smelled like vanilla and regret. It wasn't until college at UC Berkeley that he'd let himself breathe, falling hard for a poli-sci major with a laugh like summer rain. That ended in tears, but it cracked him open. Now, with Shane waiting back at the apartment with takeout and that crooked smile, Brandon had finally mustered the courage to face home. Jack Harlan was the archetype of American grit, a retired cop who'd patrolled the Tenderloin for 30 years, built like a redwood with hands that could crush walnuts. Widowed 5 years after Brandon's mom, Elena, lost her battle with cancer, he'd raised Brandon alone, filling their Craftsman house with the scent of grilled burgers and the echo of Giants games on the radio. Jack never dated, never strayed far from routine. "Men don't cry, son," he'd say, but his eyes had softened at Elena's funeral, betraying the cracks. Tonight, those cracks were about to shatter. Brandon pulled into the driveway, the porch light cutting through the rain like a hesitant beacon. Jack was waiting on the steps, flannel shirt soaked, a tumbler of bourbon in his fist. He looked smaller somehow, the lines around his eyes deeper than Brandon remembered. "Get in here," Jack grunted, pulling him into a bear hug that smelled of Old Spice and old wounds. They stumbled inside, dripping on the faded Persian rug. The living room unchanged since the 90s, leather recliner, walls lined with photos of fishing trips and Little League trophies. "Sit," Jack said, gesturing to the couch. He poured Brandon a drink, the amber liquid sloshing like unspoken secrets. Brandon's phone buzzed. "Shane, you okay? Tie's getting cold." He silenced it, throat tight. "Dad, I didn't know how you'd take it." "Mom would've," Your mom knew, Jack interrupted, sinking into his chair with a sigh that carried decades. She knew about me, too. The words landed like a sucker punch. Brandon froze, glass halfway to his lips. Knew what? Jack stared at the floor, fingers tracing the armrest's frayed edge. I was like you, kid. Back in '78, fresh out of the academy. San Francisco was wild then. Castro was exploding, discos full of guys dancing like they owned the night. I met this fella, your uncle, in a way, though we never said it aloud. Tommy. Irish kid with freckles and a fire in his belly. We patrolled together, covered each other's backs. One night, after a bust gone south, we ended up at his place off Haight. Beer led to talking to more. Brandon's world tilted. His dad stoic, straight arrow Jack, describing a lover's touch. It was surreal, like hearing Shakespeare rap. You. And Tommy, Jack nodded, eyes distant. Loved him fierce. Thought it was forever. But the AIDS scare hit like a freight train. Friends dropping like flies. Guys I'd shared smokes with, now ghosts. Tommy got sick first. Wasted away in that shitty apartment while I smuggled meds and prayed no one at the precinct noticed my overtime. He died in my arms. Brandon. Whispered my name like it was absolution. His voice broke. The bourbon forgotten. After that, I buried it. Deep. Met your mom at a precinct barbecue. She was light. Son saw through my bullshit from day one. We married because, hell, it was expected. And she loved me enough to pretend. The rain eased to a patter, the room heavy with revelation. Brandon reached out, hand on his dad's knee. Why hide it? All these years. Fear, Jack admitted, meeting his gaze for the first time. The job, the town, the era. Gays were punchlines or perverts. I couldn't risk losing you, or her. But Elena knew. On our wedding night, she said, Jack, I see you. All of you. We built a life on half-truths. But it was real. She made me promise if you ever. Well, here we are. Tears stung Brandon's eyes. A dam breaking. He'd come expecting exile. Found kinship instead. They talked till midnight. Stories of stolen kisses in patrol cars. The ache of silence. The quiet heroism of Elena's grace. Jack pulled an old photo from a drawer, him and Tommy, young and grinning at a pride march, arms slung casual-like. This is us, Jack said. The men we were. As Brandon drove back through the fog-shrouded streets, his phone lit up again. Shane's text, miss you. Doors unlocked. For the first time, the weight lifted, a bridge crossed, secrets shared. But dawn would bring questions, and Brandon sensed the story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Sunlight sliced through the blinds of Brandon's apartment like golden accusations, pulling him from a sleep tangled in Shane's limbs. The Thai food had gone cold on the counter, abandoned for urgent hands and whispered confessions in the dark. He told me everything, Brandon murmured against Shane's neck, the words spilling out between kisses. Shane, all lean muscle and easy charm, propped on an elbow, his hazel eyes searching. Your dad? The big reveal. Yeah. Turns out he's queer as a $3 bill. Hid it for decades. Brandon laughed. Brittle. Tracing the tattoo on Shane's collarbone. A compass rose. inked during a road trip from Seattle where they'd met 2 years back. Shane was a barista/aspiring screenwriter, the kind of guy who quoted Kerouac over lattes and made Brandon believe in detours. Their love was firecracker quick, late-night walks in the Castro, arguments over indie films that ended in makeup sex on the fire escape. But coming out to Jack had been the detonator, and now the smoke was clearing. Shane whistled low, rolling onto his back. "That's heavy. You okay?" He pulled Brandon close, their bodies fitting like puzzle pieces worn smooth. "Better than okay," Brandon said, nuzzling in. "It's like permission to be all of me." They lingered there, the city humming below, trolleys clanging, vendors hawking coffee, until hunger dragged them to the kitchen. Over reheated pad thai, Brandon sketched the night, Tommy's ghost, Elena's quiet knowing, the photo that felt like a family heirloom unearthed. By noon, they were out the door, Shane's hand warm in Brandon's as they navigated the throng of Market Street. San Francisco pulsed with its signature chaos. Tech bros in hoodies dodging drag queens on unicycles, the air thick with weed and ocean salt. They ducked into a cafe near the Embarcadero, the kind with mismatched mugs and chalkboard menus. "We should meet him," Shane suggested, sipping his pour-over. "Your dad. Make it official." Brandon hesitated, fork midway to his mouth. "You sure? He's old school. Cops don't always vibe with artists." Shane smirked, that lopsided grin that melted defenses. "Babe, I'm the guy who cries at Pixar. If he can handle you, he can handle me." It was settled then, a dinner invite fired off to Jack via text. "Bring your boy," came the reply. "Steakhouse on me." The week blurred in a haze of normalcy laced with novelty. Brandon threw himself into work, tweaking logos for a startup that promised to disrupt empathy, but his mind wandered to Jack's stories. He dug online, devouring archives of 80s SF, leather bars shuttered by raids, ACT-UP protests that turned streets to battlegrounds. Tommy's era, a time when love was a crime scene. One evening, scrolling through digitized police logs on a whim, Brandon froze. A grainy article from the Chronicle. Officer assaulted in hate raid. Partner lost to mystery illness. No names, but the date matched. Tommy. He showed Shane that night, the laptop screen casting blue shadows on their faces. "This is him," Brandon whispered. Shane's arm tightened around his waist. "Your dad's a survivor, Bran. Like you." They made love slowly after. Bodies a language of reassurance. The headboard tapping a rhythm against the wall like Morse code for "we're okay." Friday arrived with nerves jangling like loose change. The steakhouse in North Beach was a throwback, red vinyl booths, Sinatra crooning from speakers, waiters in bow ties who called you chief. Jack was already there, nursing a scotch, his frame filling the corner booth like it was built for him. He stood when they approached, clapping Brandon on the back before extending a hand to Shane. "Heard a lot," Jack rumbled. "All good. I hope." Shane shook it firmly, flashing that megawatt smile. "Only the embarrassing stuff. Like how he snores like a freight train." Jack barked a laugh, genuine and rumbling, and just like that, the ice thawed. Over ribeyes and creamed spinach, stories flowed, Shane regaling with tales of his Portland upbringing. Vegan protests gone awry, Jack countering with busts of the Zodiac copycats. The time he chased a purse snatcher into the bay. Brandon watched, heart swelling, as Shane drew Jack out. What was the Castro like back then? Real Wild West. Jack's eyes lit, bourbon loosening his tongue. Wilder than you kids know. We'd cruise the bars after shift, midnight sun. Bad decisions in the shadows. Tommy. He trailed off, fork pausing. Shane leaned in. No judgment, just curiosity. Sounds like he was special. Jack nodded, throat working. The kind of love that rewires you. Lost him to the plague. Watched it eat him alive. The table fell quiet, the clink of silverware a soft underscore. Brandon squeezed Shane's knee under the cloth, gratitude flooding him. As plates cleared, Jack pulled an envelope from his jacket. Yellowed, sealed with time. For you, son. Inside, letters, faded ink on onion skin paper. Tommy's handwriting, looping and urgent. Jack, the nights without you are endless. But dawn comes, and so do you. Brandon's chest ached, reading aloud in the dim light. Shane's hand on his back was anchor. Jack's nod, benediction. They parted with hugs, Jack gripping Shane a beat longer, murmuring, "Take care of him." Outside, under the neon glow of a trattoria sign, Brandon pulled Shane close. "You're magic," he said, kissing him fierce. Shane grinned against his lips. "Nah. Just love." But as they walked home, arms linked, Brandon couldn't shake a whisper of unease. Jack's eyes, when he'd handed over the letters, haunted, like he'd offloaded more than paper. Saturday brought a call from an unknown number. Brandon Harlan? A woman's voice, clipped and efficient. "This is Detective Ruiz, SFPD Cold Cases. Your father's name came up in an old file. Mind if we chat?" The line went dead before he could respond, leaving him staring at his phone, the letters burning a hole in his pocket. Secrets, it seemed, had a way of resurrecting. The precinct smelled like stale coffee and regret, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like angry hornets. Brandon shifted in the vinyl chair. Shane's text from earlier, "Call if you need backup," a talisman in his pocket. Detective Ruiz was mid-40s, sharp-suited with a no-nonsense bob and eyes that dissected alibis for breakfast. "Mr. Harlan," she said, sliding a file across the scarred table. "This is about 1982. A raid on a bathhouse in the Castro. Your father was lead officer." Brandon's stomach nodded. The file was thick, redacted blackouts like censored sins. Photos, shattered glass, overturned lockers, faces blurred but accusatory. Jack Harlan testified it was routine vice work, Ruiz continued, tapping a yellowed report. But witnesses, survivors, really say otherwise. Claims of excessive force. One man beaten bad. And Tommy O'Connor. He wasn't just a person of interest. He was Harlan's confidential informant. Intimate, some alleged. The word hung. Venomous. Intimate. Brandon's mind reeled. Jack, the protector, turned predator? That's impossible, he stammered. My dad. He loved Tommy. Ruiz's brow arched. Love's a hell of a motive. Or cover. The raid escalated. Tommy got caught in the crossfire, literally. Bullet to the leg. Infection set in. AIDS finished the job. But the shooting? That's what we're reopening. With Harlan's pension on the line. And new DNA tech. Brandon bolted. The hallway a blur. Bile rising. Outside, he retched into a storm drain. The city indifferent. Cable cars trundling past. Tourists snapping selfies with Alcatraz in the distance. Shane met him at a bench by the wharf, face paling as Brandon spilled it all, voice raw. He lied. About the raid. About how Tommy really. Shane pulled him into a hoodie-swathed embrace, the bay wind whipping around them. Hey! Breathe. We don't know the full story, but doubt festered like an untreated wound. That night, alone while Shane crashed at a friend's for a script deadline, Brandon pored over the letters. Tommy's words painted a different Jack. Tender. Tormented. The badge chokes you, love. But in the dark, you're free. One epistle, dated weeks before the raid. They're closing in. Brass knows about us. End it clean, or they'll bury you. Panic scrawled in the margins. Jack's hand. Frantic. Can't lose you. Trust me. Morning brought Jack to the door, unannounced, face ashen under the stubble. Ruiz called, he said, stepping inside without invite. The apartment felt too small for the storm between them. Brandon thrust the file at him, pages fluttering like indictments. What the hell? Dad? You shot him? Jack sank onto the couch, head in hands. Not like that. God. No. The story unspooled, halting at first, then torrent. The 80s SFPD was a viper's nest, homophobia baked in, brass turning blind eyes to bribes from mob-run clubs. Jack and Tommy, deep undercover, feeding intel on a ring laundering through the baths. We were in love. Yeah, Jack admitted, voice gravel. But the job twisted everything. Tommy wanted out, said the lies were killing him slower than the virus. I begged him to stay, to play along one more night. The raid was botched from the start. Bad intel, rookie trigger happy. Chaos erupted, screams, shattered tile, the acrid bite of tear gas. Tommy, cornered in a steam room, flashing their signal. Jack pushed through, gun drawn, but a shadow lunged, another cop, mistaking the silhouette. The shot rang, Tommy crumpling, blood pooling like accusation. I carried him out, Jack whispered, eyes wet. Held him while the medics zipped the bag. Brass covered it, friendly fire on a perp. I testified to save my skin, Brandon. To keep the pension for you and your mom. Betrayal twisted in Brandon's gut. Not just the lie, but the complicity. You let them bury him as a criminal. Erased him. Jack flinched, the weight of 40 years crashing down. I was a coward. Thought silence honored him. Elena. She found out later, through a nurse at the hospital. Forgave me, somehow. Said love's messier than justice. He stood, shoulders bowed. Tell Ruiz what you want. I'm done hiding. The door clicked shut, leaving Brandon adrift in the echo. Shane returned at dusk, arms laden with falafel and forgiveness. He owned it, Brandon said, collapsing into him. But it hurts. Like losing the dad I thought I knew. Shane cooked. They ate cross-legged on the floor, the TV murmuring some cop drama irony. Later, in bed, Shane's touch was gentle, exploratory, a mapping of scars, visible and not. You're not your dad, he murmured, lips brushing Brandon's temple. But you carry his fire. That's enough. Days bled into a tense limbo. Ruiz's investigation dragged, subpoenas piling like autumn leaves. Jack retreated to the house. Radio silence broken only by terse updates. Lawyers on it. Stay strong. Brandon threw himself into a freelance gig, designing pride merch for a nonprofit, colors bold, slogans defiant, love unredacted. Shane's script, a queer road trip tale, hit a snag. He paced the apartment, muttering lines about fathers and ghosts. One night, over wine on the balcony, Brandon cracked. What if it's true? What if he pulled the trigger? Shane set his glass down. Ice fierce. Then you grieve the man he was, and love the one trying to atone. Their kiss was salt-tanged, desperate, the city lights winking below like conspirators. But sleep evaded, dreams haunted by steam and shadows, Tommy's freckled face pleading. The climax crashed on a Tuesday. Ruiz's email. Cold as bay fog. Exhumation approved. Ballistics pending. Brandon drove to Sausalito unbidden, finding Jack in the garage, boxing old files with mechanical precision. They're digging him up, Brandon said, voice hollow. Jack paused, tape gun trembling. Good. Let the truth breathe. Father and son stood amid the dust motes, the air thick with what-ifs. I forgive you, Brandon whispered, the words a bridge rebuilt. Jack pulled him close, the hug fierce, final. Don't. Earn it. Back home, Shane waited with news of his own. A script sale, modest but real. They celebrated subdued, toasting to unearthed bones and buried loves. Yet as sirens wailed distant, Brandon sensed the fracture lines, betrayals echo, rippling outward. The exhumation hit the Chronicle like a match to dry tinder. Cold case cracks open 80s SF gay raid scandal. Front page fodder. Jack's name in bold. Tommy's ghost resurrected in pixelated grain. Reporters swarmed the house. Vans idling like predators. Mics thrust like spears. Brandon fielded calls from distant cousins. Aunties he'd ghosted post-college. All feigning shock. Your father? Queer? Shane manned the barricades, charming the vultures with quips while Brandon seethed inside. The violation raw. Jack weathered it with cop stoicism. Press conference in the precinct lot. Voice steady as he owned the fragments. I loved him. The system failed us both. No tears. Just truth. Carved clean. The public ate it up. Op-eds praising his brave reckoning. Protests reignited outside City Hall. Banners unfurling. Justice for Tommy. But privately, the toll mounted. Jack's hands shook pouring coffee. Nights lost to bourbon and what-ifs. Brandon and Shane escaped to Big Sur for a weekend, the highway curving like a lover's spine along the coast. The cabin was rustic, redwood beams, ocean roar through salt-streaked windows. They hiked trails slick with mist, hands clasped against the wind, talking in loops. The raid's forensics, bullet mismatched. Friendly fire confirmed. Elena's hidden journal unearthed by Jack. Pages of quiet fury and fiercer love. She wrote about you, Jack had said over phone. Voice thick. Said you'd be the one to break the cycle. Nights by the fire. Shane spun tales, his script now infused with Harlan lore. A father-son odyssey through fog and fault lines. Brandon sketched in a notebook. Abstract swirls of blue and crimson. Emotions made manifest. One evening, as seals barked from the rocks below, Shane knelt by the hearth. Ring box innocuous as a pebble. Marry me, he said. Not a question but a vow. Hazel eyes alight. Brandon's yes was a sob, the kiss sealing it amid crackling logs. But joy was fragile glass. Returning to the city, the scandal metastasized. Leaked memos alleging Jack took payoffs to look away from the mob. Whispers of deeper corruption. Ruiz hauled him in again. The interrogation room a confessional under siege. Brandon waited outside, Shane's hand a lifeline, until Jack emerged, face thunderous. "They're pinning the bribes on me," he growled in the parking lot. "Tommy warned me," said the brass-owned half the force. "I ignored it, thinking I was clean." Betrayal doubled down. Not just the system, but Jack's blindness to its rot. "You protected the wrong wolves," Brandon accused, voice cracking in the sodium-lit gloom. Jack's eyes, weary wells, met his. "And now? Pension's gone. Maybe jail." They drove in silence, the bridge lights mocking with their steadfast glow. The trial loomed like monsoon clouds, prelim hearings in a courthouse reeking of polish and pretense. Shane rallied. Friends from the theater scene baked casseroles. Queer elders from the Castro shared war stories over potlucks. "We've toppled bigger giants," one grizzled activist told Brandon, grip firm as iron. Elena's sister, Aunt Maria, flew in from Fresno, staunch Catholic but soft-hearted, hugging Jack like kin. "Family's not blood," she said. "It's the mess we clean up. Through it, love anchored." Shane's proposal ring glinted on Brandon's finger, a silver band etched with coordinates, their first kiss spot under the Coit Tower. They planned a small wedding, courthouse simple, then road trip honeymoon tracing Jack's old patrols. But doubt gnawed. Could vows withstand this quake? One fight erupted post-hearing. Words flung like shrapnel. Shane accusing Brandon of emotional ghosting. Brandon snapping back about fixing my daddy issues on your dime. They made up in the shower. Water scalding. Bodies colliding in urgent apology. Sorry gasped against tile. Steam veiling the fractures. Climax crested in the courtroom. Wood-paneled and solemn. Air thick with flashbulbs and fate. Jack took the stand. Suit crisp. Voice ablade. Detailing the bribes he'd rebuffed. The raid's chaos. Tommy's final plea, "Run with me, Jack. To Canada. Anywhere." The prosecutor painted him villain. Closeted cop exploiting lovers for leverage. Defense countered with character witnesses. Elena's letters read aloud. Her words a eulogy. Jack Harlan. Flawed. Faithful. Forever mine. Brandon testified last. Heart hammering. Shane's nod from the gallery a beacon. "My father didn't betray Tommy," he said. Voice steady despite the tremor. "He betrayed himself, hid to survive, to provide. But love, that he never buried." The jury deliberated 2 days. The city holding breath, protests swelling. Hashtags trending, "Justice for Harlans." Verdict dropped like guillotine. Not guilty on corruption. Manslaughter downgraded to negligence. Slap on wrist. Community service at a queer youth center. Jack walked free, but scarred. The pension a casualty. Outside, media frenzy. Inside, collapse. Father and son clinging in the hallway. Sobs mingling with flash pops. That night, over cheap pizza in the apartment, Jack raised a slice like a chalice. "To truths," he toasted. Shane clinked bottles, eyes bright. "And tomorrows." Brandon watched them, his dad, laughing loose, his fiancée, weaving them whole, and felt the betrayals sting dull to ache, then to scar. Yet in the quiet hours, as Jack dozed on the couch, Brandon rifled his jacket. Finding a crumpled note. Tommy's script. If I go first, tell our boy. The one we'll never have. Jack's edition. Faded. I did. Love. Today. Months unfurled like healing skin. The scandal scabs picked clean by time and tide. Jack volunteered at the youth center 3 days a week. Badges swapped for board games. Stories of Tommy shared in hushed circles of wide-eyed teens. Hiding hurts worse than hate, he'd say. Voice gravel soft, earning nods from kids with fresh cuts on their souls. Brandon visited often, bringing Shane's latest script drafts, now titled Fogbound Hearts, a semi-autobiographical nod to their saga. Jack devoured them, red pen gentle. More grit here, son. Life ain't all sunsets. The wedding was a quiet rebellion. October crisp, leaves turning gold in Golden Gate Park. No tuxes, just chinos and button-downs. Vows exchanged under a eucalyptus grove, Aunt Maria officiating with a priest's borrowed blessing. Guests sparse but fierce. SF queer icons rubbing elbows with precinct retirees. Toasts blending slaints with here's to us. Shane's ring slid on easy, his kiss a promise etched in salt air. Forever's just getting started, he whispered, as they danced slow to a busker's guitar. Jack watching from a bench, eyes misted. Honeymoon was Route 1 South, Malibu motels, Joshua Tree Stars capes, detours to ghost towns where Jack's letters from Tommy doubled as talismans. They read them aloud in a desert diner, voices twining with fry grease and folk radio. He'd have loved you, Brandon told Shane, hand over heart. Shane grinned, freckles catching firelight. Hell, I'd have loved him back. Laughter healed what words couldn't. Nights in canvas tents, a symphony of skin and sighs. Back in the city, life layered on. Brandon's designs went viral. Pride tees with slogans like uncloseted flooding Etsy. Shane's script sold to a streaming giant, greenlit for a limited series. Jack dated tentatively, a widower's club widower named Ray, silver fox with a sailor's squint. Their first outing, Giants game, beers in hand, Brandon and Shane tagging along like awkward chaperones. He's good for you, Brandon said later, over backyard burgers. Jack clapped his shoulder. Learned from the best, you and that firecracker. But humanism's grace lay in the fractures, not the fixes. Elena's anniversary brought ghosts. They scattered her ashes anew in the bay, boat rocking gentle, words tumbling like petals. You saw us, Jack murmured to the waves. Thank you. Brandon held Shane's hand, the ring cool against his palm, feeling the lineage, love's lost and found, hidden and holy. One dawn, fog thick as memory, Brandon woke to an empty bed. Shane was on the balcony, phone to ear, voice low. Yeah, Portland. Script tweaks, but it was the after, pulling Brandon close, confessing a job offer, relocation whisper. We could go, Shane said, eyes searching. Fresh start. Brandon's heart clenched. SF was veins, Jack the pulse. Or stay. Build here. They chose hybrid. Shane commuting for shoots, roots deepening in the city that birthed them. Betrayal's shadow lingered in small ways. Jack's flinches at sirens, Brandon's nightmares of raids, but it fueled, didn't fell. At a Castro block party, rainbows arcing under street lamps, they danced three deep. Father, son, love. Jack spun Shane clumsy, laughter booming. Brandon watched. Years later, Gray threading Brandon's temples. He'd tell their kid. Adopted. Wide-eyed with Shane's Hazel. The story sanitized for small ears. Grandpa Jack was brave. Loved big. Even when it hurt. The boy, curled on the couch amid scattered Legos, would ask, "Like you and Daddy?" Brandon would nod, pulling them close. Exactly like. In the end, it wasn't triumph or tragedy, but testament. Love. American as apple pie and protest marches. Messy and magnificent. Jack passed gentle. Ray at his side. Tommy's photo on the nightstand. At the funeral, queer choir singing over the rainbow. Confetti instead of dirt. Brandon spoke. He came out twice. Once for himself. Once for me. We carry the torch. Shane's hand in his. Ring worn smooth. Brandon stepped into sunlight. The bridge waiting crossed. Not conquered. Life's plot twisted on. But the arc bent toward light.